Welcome, everyone. To those in the room, hello. Good to see your smiling faces below the masks. And for those of you out in Zoom land, hello. Welcome to our 2022 AGM. And it will be followed by the meeting. As you can see here, it's December, the end of the year. Come quickly. You can certainly access us through our website, which is halifax.rasc.ca. Our meeting, this one, as well as the meeting, the members meeting that follows it, will certainly be on the YouTube channel later in a few days hence. And any previous ones that you may have missed is certainly there as well if you are so inclined to watch them as well. And to reach the president, be it me until the end of today or to the new president thereafter, you can reach them at president@halifax.rasc.ca. So that's how you reach us. Next one, please. Okay. Have to acknowledge the fact that we are on Indigenous lands. Our center would like to begin by acknowledging we are in Mi'kmaq, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. This territory is covered by the treaties of peace and friendship, which Mi'kmaq and Maliseet peoples first signed with the British Crown in 1725. And note that the treaties did not deal with surrender of the lands and resources, but in fact recognized Mi'kmaq and Maliseet title and established the rules for what was to be an ongoing relationship between the nations. Next, please. Also, for our center, as well as every other center across the country, the RASC believes in and practices inclusivity and diversity. All are welcome with regards of age, disability, gender reassignment, marriage and civil partnership, pregnancy and maternity, race, ethnic origin, color, nationality, national origin, religion or belief, or sex and sexual orientation. And we are certainly opposed to all forms of unlawful and unfair discrimination. Next, please. So the first part of our meeting deals with the annual general meeting. The agenda was circulated through the announced list, so you should have seen it through there. If you have hard copies here in the room, great. We did not provide any this year. And those of you in Zoom land can certainly access it on your own computers and laptops. It starts with the welcome. We will have the approval of the agenda, the minutes, as well as the appointment of the auditor for next year. We will then have our reports as well. Dave Lane, who is the auditor, will present the auditor report as well as the financial report this year. Greg was unable to attend. And then we are not reading the reports, but if, following the auditor and financial report, we will ask if there are any other questions regarding any of the reports and we'll answer those. And then we'll have the nominations, and Peter Hurley will address the nominations for the board of directors and call for nominations for appointments that will be made in January. And then we adjourn. So it's going to be, if all goes well, it will be quick and easy. And but I'm really glad to state that we do have quorum. We have 11 members here in the room, and I think you said 11 out in Zoom land. So we've got 22, and we only needed 15 for quorum, so that's wonderful. Okay, the agenda that you see before you is the agenda that we do need a motion for approval of the 2022 AGM agenda as circulated. Someone to move it? Thanks, Chris Young. Someone to second it? People on the I saw Matt Dyer's hand go up first. So it was moved by Chris Young, seconded by Matt Dyer, that the to approve the 2022 AGM agenda as circulated. Now, before you put up your hands here, folks in the room, those of you out in Zoom land, I'm hoping that Bob has posted it's gone. Please select yes or no, and we will tally yours as well as the votes in the room to determine whether or not this motion has passed or carried. And yes, we do recognize there are at least 3 people out in Zoom land that are non-members. Please do not vote. It's not kosher. So if you would, and so while Zoom land is voting, in the room, all in favor? Any noes? Okay. Have we got a total from? Okay, so that's 8 out of 8, and we've had 10 out of 11 here. So we have it carried. So the agenda is approved as circulated. The minutes from last year's AGM December 4th of 2021 were on our website as a draft. Hopefully members have had a chance to read it. Any errors or omissions in the minutes from December 4th, 2021? Okay, none noted. I need a motion to approve the minutes of the 2021 AGM as posted on the RASC Halifax Centre website. You've got that posted?
Good question. Yes, it's posted.
Okay. In the room, all in favor of approval? Okay. Any nays? Thank you. And from Zoomland? Okay. And it is
The
8 out of 8
8 out of 8.
from Zoom. Okay. So
Judy, it's
the-
taking a bit long than 30 seconds, so it's taking a minute normally to get them all in.
no worries. Okay. Thank you, Bob. All right. So the motion to approve the 2021 AGM minutes is carried. The appointment of the auditor for 2022-23. I give Dave Lane my sincere thanks for offering to sit for a second year as the auditor. He's put his name forward. We need a motion to appoint Dave as auditor for 2022-23. Chris Young has made the motion. Paul Brussel, brain fart. Paul Brussel has seconded it. All in favor? Just a moment. We'll wait till the it's up and running. Okay. All in favor in the room for appointing Dave Lane as auditor for 22-23? Okay. Thank you. Any no's? And we have to wait a few moments, folks, here in the room till the Zoom.
Yeah, 100% yes.
Okay. So Dave, thank you. You are auditor yet again. I think what we'll do is we'll ask for, except for the, well, actually, they don't have the auditor's report or the financial report at this point, but if there are any questions regarding any of the other reports, we will take those now, and then we will have Dave present the auditor and finance report. Any questions regarding the other reports, which would be the president, the vice president, secretary, national council rep, governance, library, Nova Notes, observing chair, outreach chair, and St. Croix Observatory.
So those are all on the website?
They were circulated only at this point.
Okay, yeah, I guess I didn't.
Okay,
Yeah.
they were circulated on this past Wednesday with all the reports. Any questions? Okay, Dave, I'll hand it over to you to present the auditor and financial report, if you would, please.
So as Judy mentioned, Greg Dill was unable to be here today. He's apparently an umpire for curling, so he's up in Digby umpiring curling.
Dave, you're dropping out.
I'm test 1, 2, 3.
Yeah.
Okay. I've worked with.
Dropping.
I wonder if it's because of that. Test. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
It's okay. Okay. All right. Must have been too close to the speaker. Okay. As a repeat again, I've worked with Greg Dill over the last couple of weeks to, and the bottom line there is, surprisingly, we came ahead about $1,900 this year. I would classify this year as a fairly uneventful year. We didn't have too many expenditures, and neither did we have, let's get my notes here. Neither did we have too much extraordinary revenue. I don't have the information about membership count, so I don't know whether that was in any of the other reports, because I just didn't see that as part of my, but I sense based on the numbers that different than last year. Down, Judy just said down one, not down 9 from the prior year is just a comment from Judy. So going through this, the revenue, I'll just point a few highlights. The fees from national office are up a bit, but not because we have more members. It's because of corrections to I guess missing revenue. They, as some of you know, they've had some challenges on the IT front in the last year regarding processing of memberships and I guess during the process of producing new monthly.
Dave, you dropped again? You're dropping again.
Okay, so excuse me, just to continue, yeah, membership fees are higher than normals because of these one-time corrections that came in, which would have been, I guess, revenue probably from the prior year, or mostly the prior year. Donations, that's a bit higher than usual because there was a telescope that was donated to the center, valued at about $800, and my understanding is that David Chapman sold the telescope privately and donated half the money to the center and half the money to scholarship here at St. Mary's for undergraduate students. Interest, not much there. It's bank interest. Our GIC interest is actually not recorded as during the time that it is maturing. It's recorded when it actually matures, which is I'm told December 4th, I guess, which would be Monday. That's an $8,000 GIC. Calendars, revenue, say that's the sale of merchandise. Not too unusual, I guess, probably about, you know, that seems like a lot of calendars, maybe about 50 or 60 calendars, something like that. And that's nothing else notable. On the expense side, the meeting cost is principally this is the annual fee for our Zoom license, $230. Newsletter is the amount we spend to print and mail those who choose to subscribe to Nova Notes. And on the other side, I didn't mention up here, there's a Nova Notes print subscriptions $260. You see, it's about the same, but that's kind of an accident because it doesn't always match what you know, the timing doesn't always match because we record the revenue when it's received, but it's mailed up over, you know, a subsequent year, which may split between 2 fiscal years. And Judy has a question. Okay, yeah, Judy just mentioned that we've decided to not offer the print option anymore. And I suspect that the reason for that is that it's grown very large in size and would become very expensive to print in low quantities and mail. That would be my guess. That's why the decision was made to do that. So there are a few more sort of obligations over the next few months to complete the year for those who paid, but that'll be the end of it for this, unless that decision is changed. Office administration, that's principally the post office box, the renewal of our Registry of Joint Stocks Society registry, and miscellaneous postage and things like that. Educational activities is principally the Sky News, paying for the bulk orders of Sky News that we get at very low prices to give away. Insurance, that seems to go up every year. It's $1,706. That's the insurance, both property and liability insurance for St. Croix Observatory. So it seems to creep up. Last year was 1687, this year 1706. So I think that trend will probably continue. Operating expenses for SCO is the other big thing. Not a whole lot there because the electric project that was conducted was done prior to this year, or mostly done. That's mostly incidentals and probably a little bit of work to finish the electrical work and the cost of the barbecues that we held out there this year. And that's basically it. Are there any questions on the income statement before I switch to the balance sheet? Yep. The question was, what is educational activities? And the intent there is that's the revenue we receive or the things we spend when we go and do outreach. So if we had to buy, say, the Starfinders from National Office and then give them away at public events, that's what that would be. And I think the only educational activities, yeah, so that is principally what we paid to get free, essentially, copies of Sky News that we can give away. Okay, the question was why has it dropped roughly half from last year, from 414 to 231? I suspect that, no, I don't know what, I didn't go back and look what was last year, but my suspicion was that, it's just whenever someone goes and buys a bunch of stuff and it doesn't end up getting put in inventory, it just gets expensed at that moment. So, and my also guess is that we probably have, because we haven't had in-person meetings to give away Sky News, we have probably cut back on the number we bought. I think they charge about $2 a net, not roughly, this is just from memory, about $2 per issue or something like that. So I think that's principally what that is. Okay, Judy just said it. We only presently get 20 per issue instead of 40 is what we have done. So that would in itself explain most of that difference. I think if you went back a few years before COVID, when we used to do a lot more outreach with in person, we were buying, packs of 100 of the Starfinders and some of the other materials that National Office produces, and either gives away or we purchase at low, at postage cost. So that's probably why that's been quite a bit lower than, and hopefully that will all change next year. Any other questions? Any questions from the remote folks? No, nothing from the internet. Okay, let's switch to the balance sheet. So the income statement, just for those who aren't familiar with these things, is basically the revenue we receive and expend in the actual year. Where are we at here? Income balance sheet. Hopefully this will all fit. Yay. Yeah. So the balance sheet is essentially just a statement at an instant in time. So at September 30th, 2022, how many assets we have and how much we have in liabilities, and what is essentially our net worth. What are we worth? And if you had to fold us up and make us go home. So cash, that's the bank account, about $8,500. We have 2 GICs worth $4,000 each that mature in a couple of days. And my understanding from Greg is that the intention is to simply renew those, take the income that's been earned in the last year and a half since they were purchased, and that in our bank account, call that income. Estimated library, at some point we did an estimate as to the value of the library, and that is reduced by 3% each year, under the assumption that books become out of date. Hopefully along we'll see the library out here again. We can find a librarian. I'm getting some indications that there may be a future librarian. Observatory equipment is mostly telescopes and a few other odds and sods that relate to St. Croix, and they are presently appreciated again at 3% per year. And there's a spreadsheet that indicates a list of all those things and when they were purchased or given to us. And each year there's a table that value keeps going down unless we buy more equipment. Miscellaneous estimated. Good luck. those have been on, that number, the $137 has been on the books since 1984. And no one knows what it is, so the present day auditor wrote it off. Just like, what was that guy on Seinfeld? Had the episode where he just write it off. Well, I wrote it off. We don't know what it is, so it's worthless. So that's part of the previous income statement. It would have been bad debt or write-offs. So that just gets expensed in the year. Liabilities, we have an accounts payable of 935. That's largely expenses related to our summer work, the Nova East, that weren't actually paid out until after September 30th. So that effectively comes out of our bank account. So if you want to know what our real bank account is today, it's closer to 7,500 or so. Capital decision was made some time ago to that capital is essentially just the sum of our assets less our liabilities. So essentially it's the net, and we've decided some years ago to put some of our equity in a special fund called the Nova East Working Equity, and the intention there is that Nova East Committee essentially has that much money if they were to choose to go in the hole, bring in an outside speaker. That's essentially the accumulation of profits from prior Nova East up to a cap of $5,000. So next year's Nova East could say, we're going to bring in Stephen Hawking, although he died, didn't he? That's probably going to be difficult. Whatever, they could actually decide to bring in, or really enhance Nova East on some special anniversary or whatever, and they don't have to worry about losing money because they can pull out that money in from this equity, this former profits account, but it's limited at $5,000. And that's basically it. In an ideal world, this number here, the difference between last year and this year, 23, 43, 48, that would be equal to the profit that we had in the previous year. You'll notice it's not. Profit was about 1,900, and that's 24, 43. Why is that not $1,900? I have no idea. You'll have to ask the auditor from last year. I think there were some errors in last year's books, would be the only way I can say, but it's a few $100s, it's not a lot. But I can't explain why it's not straight. It may have simply to do the way that some expenses were timed. I'll talk about that a little bit in the audit letter. So are there any questions about the balance sheet? I'm not hearing none from the internet. Nope. Okay. All right. So I guess the next is the audit letter. Okay. So since I have the mic, I'll just repeat Judy's motion, since I probably shouldn't make the motions. But Judy makes the motion. She'll indicate if she agrees to accept the financial statement prepared as presented. Seconded by my brain fart, Chris Young. And all in favor in the room? I guess I can plan. Counting every hand, so there are no no's. And there's a poll, I believe, going on. Result online is 100%. So on behalf of Judy, as chair, I'll pretend to declare that motion has carried. And next is I guess the auditors, or not? Yeah, auditors report. Okay. So I just have to bring up the auditors report here. So unfortunately, I have done this a number of times in the past, so it's quite easy to just load up the file from before 2018 in this case. So I'll just read it, and I may stop at some point and make a few comments. I've examined the financial records for the period October 1st, 2021 to September 30th, 2022. I also worked with Treasurer Greg Deal to resolve any issues I noticed before writing this letter. The balance sheet and income statement were prepared by me. starting with drafts prepared by Greg. I should say that's not the normal process, but because he's in Toronto and I'm here and I couldn't actually see his books and there wasn't a whole lot of time to turn things back and forth, we just agreed that I would make the changes that needed to be made, rather than not be able to give this report today. To continue, I believe that the balance sheet presents an accurate account of the financial position of the center as of September 30th, 2022, with the following notes. Recent practice of not recording accrued interest on GICs understates their present value. As I mentioned earlier, we have money there that's sitting there that when they mature, we'll get the income, but in fact, it was earned during this year. The second one, asset miscellaneous estimate has been written off as no one knows what asset it related to. I've also looked closely at the income statement directly using the accounting software GNU Cash and spot check the substantiating records, bank statements, and receipts. Note that due to virtual operations over the past year or two, all records that I reviewed were electronic records. So essentially what happened there is Greg sent me scans of bank statements, scans of all of the receipts and the deposits and so on, and I just picked a few at random just to verify they were there. I didn't check every one. I believe the income statement is an accurate representation of the center's net income for the fiscal year, with the following notes. Just going to move that up so you can see it. Yeah, okay. Membership fees included a one-time correction of about $600 related to prior times. I mentioned that earlier. Membership fees are recorded in the month they are paid to the National RASC paid by members to the National RASC and do not consider the period that the membership services are to be provided. So for example, if a member were to pay in September 2022, we record that as income for last year, but reality is that we're providing that services through the entire next year. And it's just too darn complicated to actually try to split it all up between the 2 years. And the reality is we don't have very many non-material things we actually give to our members anyway. So continue there. Monthly reports are provided by the RASC. The monthly reports provided by the RASC still have small non-material errors that make it difficult to properly split the monthly deposits into their component parts. You may have mentioned last year's AGM. There was a fairly heated discussion between members present and I believe our executive director, and there was a lot of work happened over the last year to improve these reports, actually create reports. They're still not perfect. There are issues, which I hope help get them fixed in the next while because they're still not perfect. Newsletter, revenue and expenses are recorded when they occur, as I mentioned earlier. But as such, they're not amortized. I do have a few recommendations though that should be passed on to the next treasurer and in some cases the board of directors. So standard thing, since we're in electronic times before the books are put to rest, printouts of all revenue, expense, balance sheet, transactions, journal should be included in the records binder. In addition, all electronic records should be consolidated onto a USB drive and kept with the paper record so that we have a record ongoing. 2, the observatory equipment asset is presently depreciated only 3% declining balance method. This means that equipment, most of which was not just new, remains on the books for a very long time. My recommendation is that next year the depreciation method be switched to 10% straight line method. That essentially means that at 3% declining balance, what we do is we take the value, say 10,000, find out 3%, so that's $300, reduce it to 9,700. Next year it becomes, not 300 down, but 280 something, so essentially the asset never goes away, even if the thing's 100 years old. My recommendation is telescopes these days have a lifetime. They have technology in them often, and they get lost, worn out, people forget about them, they're disused, whatever, they become less valuable. So my recommendation is that we switch to 10% straight line, which means that essentially whatever the asset is, that asset will disappear completely from the books after 10 years, right to zero. That's a recommendation, that's all it is. And just to make our value of our assets a little more realistic. So that, my recommendation is that should come before the board to decide if they want to do that. If you want to disagree with the auditor, that's fine too. Doesn't matter. It's just an opinion. Don't just scroll that up. Just the bottom arrow key, I think will do it. Number 3, there's been an inconsistency in what's recorded as an expense and depreciable asset. For example, some electrical work in 2012 was capitalized, but the recent 2021 major electrical upgrade valued at $15,000 was expense. The board should create a consistent policy about what is capitalized and what is not. So, create a policy, write it down, approved by the board, anything over anything over $1,000 that has a life expectancy more than X years is capitalized. Anything that doesn't meet that test is just written off in the year. I personally would not have written off the $15,000 in the prior year, but I was an auditor, and I think that was a decision of more or less of Ian Anderson, I think, who drove that decision, I think. There are small discrepancies between the monthly reports provided by the MNSC and the associated deposits that needs to be resolved. In the meantime, I proposed a workaround that will make them more accurate. If I am appointed auditor again next year, I will communicate that to the new treasurer. Overall, it averages out about the same, but you'll have 1 month that's like deposit $300. The substantiation will say $306.50. Next month, it'll be the other way around. It'll be minus $650. So there's clearly something wrong in the timing or something in the way they create the reports that doesn't match the deposit they give us. So they have to figure that out and make it work. The new cash accounting software should be fully used so that the year-end work is much easier to do and to audit. In recent years, many of the balance sheet accounts not dated, and the invoices and bills features were not used for much of the year. For much of the year, this is fine, but when you get near the beginning and ending of the year, it's problematic. Essentially, what I'm saying there is that the accounting software, like if for example, Judy submits no, I'm picking on you particularly, but if someone submits I don't know, Nova East expense in September 15th, but treasurer doesn't write the check until October 15th. The way that it's been done in recent years is that would be connected with the wrong fiscal year. But in the accounting software, if you put it in as a bill, it'll just be owing and it'll be an accounts payable. So you'll get the right answer in the accounting. But in the last couple of years, that hasn't really been done. And there's been a lot of manual work at the end of the year to try to correct all those things to make the statements correct. And it's an easy fix. You just have to use the software the way that it's intended. And that's the end of my report. So this report, along with the financial statements, and Greg is going to write the usual treasurer's notes to go along with statements, and that I believe that will be published in the next Nova Notes. So Judy said motion to approve the auditor's report, and I believe Bob is saying is moving. Seconded by Chris Young. In the room. I am seeing every hand going up in the room.
%.
We're waiting for the poll.
100%.
100%. Okay, so on behalf of Judy, we'll call that passed. And I think I'm done.
Thanks, David. All right. Okay. So I will ask the question again regarding, oops, sorry. Am I still muffled? All right. There we go. Okay. Thanks, Dave, for the auditor and financial report. I had asked while they were setting up to present these, if there are any questions regarding the reports. I will ask the question again. Are there any other questions regarding any of the reports that were circulated prior to this meeting? Okay. No questions? Then I need someone to move to accept the board of directors and committee reports as pre-circulated. Chris, seconder? I'm sorry, I don't know your name. I apologize. Oh, thanks, Brad. Masks, you know. Yeah, Brad Philippone, seconded it. Okay, all in favor for approval? In the room? Thank you. Unanimous. And we'll wait for the Zoom.
100%.
Fabulous. Okay, so approved. Wonderful. Thank you, people. All right, next up is the call for nominations. And I apologize to the group out in Zoom land and to the people in the room. I failed to slide up for any people, you, but I need the list if you wouldn't mind passing that. People out in Zoom land and those of you that have access in the room to your to the handout, we do have nominations for all the positions, but certainly nominations are still open, and I will read the current nominations as they exist. President is John Nangreaves, Vice President Pat Kelly, Secretary Peter Hurley, Treasurer Jamie Wynot, Director Judy Black, Directors, the other directors would be Greg Dill, Matthew Dyer, David Hoskin, Kathy Walker, and Tony McGrath. Are there any further nominations? Are there any further nominations? Are there any further nominations? Okay, so the Board of Directors,
Move.
sorry,
Move the nominations be
closed.
closed.
All right, thank you, Bob. So I need a motion for the nominations to be closed. Thank you, Dave. Seconder? Chris? All in favor? Unanimous here. How are we out there?
%.
Fabulous. Thank you. Okay, the appointments, the listing of appointments was also noted in the email that went out in Peter's nominating committee report. Keeping in mind the appointments are not, we don't vote on them. Okay, sorry. The nominations are not voted on here. They are appointed by the board, and they will be considered by the new board at their first meeting on January 3rd, 2023. The nominations as they currently stand are for Honorary President Mary Lou Whitehorn, who's actually in that role until the end of this coming year, actually 2023. The auditor, we've already appointed the auditor, Dave Lane. The Dark Sky Preserve co-chairs, Tony Schellink and Peter Hurley. Governance Committee Chair, I agreed to sit as that. The librarian, yes, we do have a librarian, Dave. Jerry Black is currently nominated. The National Council representative, I will offer my name for that one. Nominating Committee, Peter Hurley. Nova East Planning Committee Chair, Chris Young. Nova Notes co-editors, Lisa Ann Fanning and John McPhee. Outreach Chair and the Observing, actually it should be EPO Chair and Observing Chair, Education and Public Outreach. David Hoskin has agreed to fill both of those positions, and our school manager, John Ledard, has stepped up to be nominated again. So if there are any further nominations for these positions, please email President at, the Secretary, Peter. That's right. Sorry? Committee Chair, which in this case would be the Secretary at halifax.rasc.ca. So let Peter know if there are any further nominations, and the board will consider it on January the 3rd. So I think, and that's it. I need a motion to adjourn, please, for the AGM. Thank you, David Hoskin. Meeting so adjourned. All right. Thank you, one and all. Less than an hour. Next up is our general meeting. If we can get my presentation back up. Next slide, actually. you would? Should we have a 5-minute break? Why don't we have a 5-minute break, folks? We'll call it a nutrition break, if you like, and we'll be back in 5 minutes.
Good. All right. So first up then is the photo montage, or that members consisting of images taken by members over the month of November, and we had a couple major events in the sky that were the focus of people. First being the total lunar eclipse on November 8th. So you'll see a lot of images there. And we're seeing more planetary images, I think because of the interest in Mars, which I currently at its closest approach to the Earth. So it's well suited or situated for imaging. So Jerry Black took this image of Jupiter. And narrow. I'll just hit this. Okay. And then Jerry took this nice image of Mars a couple days ago. And he hasn't abandoned his deep sky imaging. The Pelican Nebula turned out quite nice. Michael Boschat's been shooting out of his apartment window again. A couple nice shots of the moon. A nice image of the moon just last night, I guess. No, not last night. Couple nights ago. And some images of the sun. Started November. One in white light on the left, and one in hydrogen alpha on the right. A very nice prominence here, looping over. Michael caught. And Michael's been sketching. So 2 sketches Michael made of Mars near the end of November, and he caught the dark markings and identified them with his labels, and also the North Polar ice cap, which has been quite prominent in this apparition of Mars. And last but not least, the total lunar eclipse. Nice sequence of shots. Dave Chapman also took pictures of the total lunar eclipse. Jason Dane, as usual, had some really nice deep sky images. This is the Bernard 175, Dark Nebula in Cepheus. And the Lion Nebula, Sharpless 132, also in Cepheus. And Jason also took a shot of the moon. I think that's a waxing crescent, probably. Jason doesn't usually do lunar imaging, so that's a nice change. Lisa Ann Fanning's been busy. She took this shot at the start of the month of the conjunction between the moon and Jupiter. Over here. And Lisa's experience of the total lunar eclipse. Really nice composition there. And strictly speaking, these weren't all taken by Lisa in November. They were in the past year, but I thought this was really neat image. All the different colors of the moon that she captured through different images. Paul Gray, Jupiter's Great Red Spot. I took this image of the Southwest Lunar Highlands at the start of the month. And this is my experience of the lunar eclipse. And Jupiter and Io. and Mars, taken November 25th. You can see the that North Polar ice cap that I mentioned that Michael saw in his picture, in his sketch. Nancy Hughes took this sequence during the lunar eclipse on November 8th. New member, yes. Blair McDonald doing some planetary imaging. Blair almost never has done planetary imaging. We have a convert. Nice shot of Jupiter and shot of Mars. I think Blair is mentioned this more on when we do the What's Up, but I think Blair is preparing for the occulting of Mars by the moon in about a week's time. Kathy Walker took this picture with her all-sky camera. It's a very bright bolide that occurred, or at least the time on her sky camera was 2:12 a.m. Atlantic Standard Time on Sunday morning. That would have been something pretty cool to see if you're looking at the sky then. Most people are probably sleeping though. Kathy took this picture of an open cluster, NGC 1027 in Cassiopeia. Kathy's been focusing on Cassiopeia. This is Sharpless 187, an emission nebula in Cassiopeia. And Jemmy Wynot, to finish things off, captured these nice set of images of the total lunar eclipse. And I believe that's it.
Okay, thanks, David. Next up on our agenda is our special speaker. Thank you. For some of you who've attended Nova East a couple of years ago, you will recognize Tiffany because she was our special guest speaker at that particular session. And in fact, I think you had just finished defending your master's thesis, if I remember correctly. But Tiffany is currently the astronomy technician at St. Mary's University, and in charge of the day-to-day or night-to-night, as she puts it, operations of the Burke-Gaffney Observatory on campus here at St. Mary's University. She completed a Bachelor of Science and Master of Science degree here, and she's been giving tours of the observatory for 7 years now, by the sounds of things. She's worked as a physics, math, and astronomy instructor at universities and colleges, and she loves to share the wonder and joy of space with anyone that will listen. In her free time, she enjoys walking her dogs and ordering takeout from local restaurants. Lucky you. So, without further ado, I give you Tiffany.
Welcome. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to just talk about the observatory for a little bit. And so most of my talk will be about the Burke-Gaffney Observatory, how we are sharing it here in the community and around the world, and how you can use the Burke-Gaffney Observatory as well. And Dave will be my clicker, where we'll go to the next slide. So this is me. That was a lovely introduction. I appreciate it, and kind of gave all of the background of me. So I did my Bachelor's of Science, my Master's of Science here at St. Mary's in astrophysics and astronomy. And I've been running public tours and student observing sessions at the Burke-Gaffney Observatory since I kind of asked Dave for the job back in like 2015 when I knew that some of the telescope operators were graduating and I was interested in it. And it's good to have interested students leading observatory things. It's not very fun to have disinterested students leading them. So I've been able to share the telescope, the observatory, with a bunch of people for a while. And now I am the astronomy technician at St. Mary's. So it is my job now to keep the observatory running, among other things, and calling Dave frantically sometimes when things break. Because Dave recently retired. He was the observatory technician for 29 years and the director of the Burke-Gaffney Observatory for about half that time. So I had big shoes to fill, but we'll keep things running here. So I'll go to the next slide. And this is me. Go back. So this is me. I run like Judy mentioned, the day-to-day or night-to-night operations of the Burke-Gaffney Observatory. I lead tours, I lead private group tours. I also train students to use the observatory as well, to lead these tours, to practice science communication, sharing astronomy with the rest of the world. And I also run and maintain some of the computing equipment for the astronomy and physics department here at St. Mary's. So this is an assortment of photos of the different things in my day-to-day, or maybe less often like cleaning the mirrors of the big telescope, running tours down at the bottom. There's a inside of a computer up at the top, just to signal that I do computer things too. So I'll go to the next slide. And also related to RASC, the Halifax RASC and Nova East websites happen to live on the servers, the computers that we have in the astronomy and physics department. So if something goes wrong with those websites, it could partially be my fault. But we are connected to RASC. We share a lot of things with RASC here. I'll go to the next slide. Like Judy mentioned, I gave a talk at Nova East in 2019. It was right after I defended my master's thesis. I almost backed out at the last moment because I was so tired, but was convinced anyway to give it. So I talked there a little bit about the observatory and using the observatory too. But that was 3 years ago. That was a while ago. So we'll see some more things here. So what is the Burke-Gaffney Observatory? It's a combination of some nice things. There is a large telescope. There are some smaller telescopes. We've got some weather sensors. We have a rooftop observation deck. There are incredible views of the south end of Halifax from up on the 24th floor of the Loyola Residence Building here on campus. And of course, the observatory is also made up of the people that work there. So that's myself. It's the BGO director. It is our student telescope operators and our student volunteers. And of course, it is also made up of many, many, many lines of code, thanks to Dave Lane and all of his work getting up and running. So these are just photos of what the observatory space looks like. It is at the top of the Loyola Residence Building, so you can see the little dome at the top of the building there. And then inside the dome, we have large telescope with some other sorts of accessories and such on the floor there. But that's what it looks like. Go to the next slide. Yeah, I think that you told me once, and I don't remember. Those lines I will mention, because you mentioned them. They are actually to signal where it is safe to stand for the tour guests. So when we have people all inside that small dome space, the telescope, and I'll talk about this a little bit later, the telescope moves around really fast. So the first time that the telescope moves around, when we have people in that space, I make them all stand on the one side of the green tape so that they see how it moves so that they don't get their head hit the next time that it moves. But yeah, that's the green tape there. So I figured I would go through a tiny bit of the history of the Burke-Gaffney Observatory first. So it was originally built at the same time that the Loyola Residence Building was built, and it was built based on the donation of, at the time, an anonymous donor. So it was named after the Reverend Dr. Burke-Gaffney, who was a popular and very admired lecturer and professor and dean here at St. Mary's University. My understanding is he used to be the guy that like the news and the general public would go to when they had questions about anything out in space. I've read that he was really quite interested in UFOs as well. So it's a really interesting individual. And he was the founder of the astronomy department at St. Mary's University. So the observatory was named after Burke-Gaffney. So it is the Burke-Gaffney Observatory. And from 1972, when it opened, to about 2013, it was equipped with this original 16-inch Ealing classical Cassegrain telescope in that nice photo from the SMU Library archives. We'll go to the next one. Go back. And then so in 2013, the observatory was significantly upgraded thanks to a donation from Dr. Ralph Medjuk and his family. and some contributions from St. Mary's as well that allowed the Burke-Gaffney Observatory to upgrade our telescope. So the telescope at that point was about 40 years old, so we were able to upgrade the telescope, automate the equipment at the Burke-Gaffney Observatory, renovate the BGO office space and the dome space, make it more maybe modern, add some windows. And we also added an observation deck on the roof to allow for observing with some of our smaller telescopes and doing some solar observing on the roof as well. And then in late 2021, so about this time last year, Dave and I, but mostly Dave, replaced the 50-year-old mount. So the original mount was removed with a crane from the observatory very carefully. We put the new mount, this Planewave L600 mount, on and put the telescope back on, and Dave got it all up and running. And this new mount has been really awesome for the observatory space. We were able to upgrade it from support from the Dean of Science office at SMU. We were able to get the money to do that. And it is so much faster than our old mount. It's like 40 times faster in slew speed than our old mount was. And it allows for really precise tracking of objects. So it allows, for instance, our students to take long exposure images and have our targets stay in the center of the field of view, or take exposures over or sub-exposures over 3 hours, say, to do an exoplanet transit, and all of the stars that you expect to be in the field of view continue to stay in the field of view. Whereas before, with the old mount, you could see a bunch of drifting happening. So the observatory space, if you visited it more than about 10 years ago, looks entirely different now. And we're excited about those upgrades. Also, important side note, this is the old mount. This is a piece of the old mount. If you can carry it out of the observatory, you can take it home, the whole thing. A note that there are 24 steps that you need to carry it down. So for now, this 500 piece of equipment is still sitting in the corner of the dome. That is still a project to be tackled to actually get that out of there. I have no idea how they got it up there in the first place. But I were told in pieces. So Dave is mentioning, for those on Zoom, Dave is mentioning that we're told that it was brought up in pieces, which makes a lot more sense, I think, because this one piece is a lot. Anyway, if you can carry it, you can have it. Next slide, though. And the BGO opened in 1972, so we celebrated its 50th anniversary this year in 2022, which was exciting. And go to the next slide, because it's a little bit of a celebration. But the observatory is 50 years old this year. And we've had a really busy year. So we replaced that 50-year-old mount. Dave retired from 29 years, first as BGO technician and then as the director and technician. The BGO gained a new technician, that's me, and a new director. So Assistant Professor Dr. Vincent Henel-Brunet is the new director of the Burke-Gaffney Observatory. We restarted our public tours and our private group tours that had all been paused starting in March 2020. We were able to get those restarted again, brought people back into the space. And I also hired and trained new telescope operators from our graduate students and undergraduate students, new tour guides, found volunteers, and many of our undergraduate students to help us lead some of our outreach events to bring the community into the BGO space. So in the last slide, I mentioned public tours and private tours. We offer free public tours roughly every other weekend. And they're mostly led by the student tour guides. And right now, that is a few graduate students that are our tour guides, and one alumni. And we also have student volunteers that help out as well. So all of those public tours events or public tour events are mostly led by our students here at St. Mary's. And the observatory dome and office is a really small space. And so during normal times, we have space for at most 25 individuals. And I've kept the numbers down a little bit during these still COVID times, just for safety. And given the small space, we require all of our guests to reserve tickets just online. They're free tickets, but you've got to reserve a ticket. to get in. And we were doing this before the pandemic as well. And what is absolutely crazy to me is all of these tickets sell out within 2 or 3 minutes whenever they become available. And I have not done any advertising at all. It is all just word of mouth. Even when I list new upcoming tours on our website, like I don't advertise it anywhere. People are just constantly checking in to see when they can come up to the observatory. There is so much interest in the local community for people to come up and look through our telescope, and it's really exciting. And then the next slide is just some numbers here. So in 2022, the observatory will have welcomed more than 50 groups. So that's private tour groups, St. Mary's led or related events, and also public open houses. And that's pretty impressive considering we only very slowly started the private tours in late March and then started the public tours in May. And so to have more than 50 groups come up in 3/4 or less of the year, it's quite a lot. And if I have maybe an average of 15 guests or so per tour, that's like 750 people that have come through our observatory space in 2022. I am really excited and continue to be excited about sharing the observatory with the community, and anybody that would want to come up and see the stars through our telescope. And so these are some of the people of the Burke-Gaffney Observatory. Dave is the one that really got it all going. We wouldn't be anything without Dave at this point. He is the BGO Director Emeritus Director of the BGO. And then as a side note, St. Mary's over the summer had a whole bunch of professional photos of like the observatory and its staff taken for their annual report to the community. So I get to use some of these really nice photos in these presentations. But just a note of some of the other individuals related. So there's me, and then Fraser represents one of the graduate students that is our TA. Over on the right side, there is Dr. Vincent Henol-Brunet, who is the current BGO director. And then we have a couple of undergraduate students that are part of the undergrads that volunteer to help out with those tours. So this is generally the who of the BGO. And then the next slide. The other who is Ralph. Ralph is our big telescope. And if we go to the next slide, I'm going to talk about Ralph a little bit. So its real name is the Dr. Ralph Majek telescope. So named after Dr. Ralph Majek, who donated the money for us to upgrade our telescope to this new telescope. And some specs up on the slide. I'm not going to read through them all, but it is a plane wave CDK 24. So it is a 24-inch diameter, about 61 centimeter diameter, reflecting telescope. And its most notable feature, I'm going to kind of look towards the bottom here. The most notable feature of our telescope at the Burke-Gaffney Observatory, it is a social media controlled robot. So not only can you go up to the telescope and look through the eyepiece and have everybody come in our public tours and our private group tours, the telescope can also be used by anybody in the world remotely. So I'm going to go to the next slide and talk about that a little bit. So the notable feature, I just moved it up to the top, is a social media controlled robot telescope, and is one of only 3 associated observatories in the world that are connected to social media like this. The other 2, one of them is in Dave Lane's backyard, and then the third one is not running right now, but is a joint project between Dave and St. Mary's. It is the mini robotic observatory, so a mini Ralph that lives in like a little doghouse that will at some point be up and running again. And having an automated telescope, especially something that's connected to socials, where most of our students would be able to find it, is useful because during a term, we might have 150, 200 students in astronomy related classes that might want to use the observatory. And so at St. Mary's, we run a first year astronomy for non-science majors class that is always really popular. And one of the final projects that they can do is to request an image from the telescope or to go up to the telescope and draw what they see. And then for our astrophysics classes, for the astrophysics majors, there are a variety of observing projects that they can do from first, second, third, and fourth years. So if we have lots of students, busy schedules, the fact that students like myself at one point generally leave things for the last minute, technicians need to sleep, it's useful to be able to utilize all of the time in a given night and not just the first few hours of a night, say from like until midnight or 1 a.m. or whenever somebody would eventually go to sleep. And then also the fact that we have a limited capacity, right? We can only fit about 25 people in the BGO space at once. And so if we're able to allow more individuals in the community and around the world to use the telescope, more people can get that experience. And also, the really big one in Halifax, there's not very many clear nights. And so what's useful about having this robotic telescope is it can take advantage of when the sky's clear, maybe later on in the night, or if only part of the night is clear, it can take advantage of those hours. And also in the summer, skies get dark very late. It can be rough to stay up to get your observations in. So having the telescope that doesn't need to sleep is useful there. And we'll go to the next one. So we're connected to social media. Like I started to mention, the telescope is on Twitter. It has a Facebook account that you can message it at. You can access the telescope via text message. There's also an app that works on Android phones, on Windows computers, on Mac computers, and you can talk to the telescope over email. So we'll go to the next one. And when this service was first unveiled by Dave in 2015, it got a lot of media attention. So Global News, the CBC, Maclean's, were all talking about St. Mary's Twitter telescope, and rightfully so. It was the first one in the world ever connected, or kind of the second one, I guess, if you count the one in your backyard, connected to social media. Was it the first? First one in the world connected to social media. So rightfully so, it got quite a bit of attention. And I'll go to the next slide. In 2016, Twitter, on like their official blog, called it one of the 10 amazing Canadian stories on Twitter. So there was, I think, some well-deserved attention from Twitter at that point too. And it was especially after those news stories and some interviews that Dave Lane gave and stories in the newspapers, our public tours got quite a bit more popular after that time as well. And I feel like they haven't really settled down since. And so on the slide, I have different examples of the observatory on its social media. In the middle of this long screenshot is from its Twitter account last night when I was preparing some of these slides. It's hard to read the text, but like in this image, it says, I just took this image for Reed Palmer of M42 in the green filter. And so as the robot is doing things overnight, it is updating its social media accounts to share the images that it's taking, to share its status. If it gets cloudy, it'll post on Twitter that the skies got cloudy. Also, I've got the Facebook interface over on the right side. You can essentially have this two-way communication with the telescope. Ask it certain things, it will respond back to you. And the big thing shown in this screenshot of our communicator app is you can request that the telescope take images for you. So in that communicator app, the gray square there, or the gray rectangle, I'm asking it to take an object or take an image of the object M42, the Orion Nebula, in the H alpha filter. And it tells me that this object is in my request queue with a certain ID. It tells me what the exposure is going to be. It tells me what the filter is going to be. And so this becomes really powerful for anybody that would like to see their own images of objects up in the sky, or individuals that might want to use a telescope but don't have access to a telescope, or if you want to take photos of things that are out in space but don't have the necessary equipment to do that, this allows anybody locally and around the world to be able to do that with our telescope. I'll go to the next one. And the way that this works is Ralph, the telescope, listens on socials to be tagged, first of all. So if on Twitter, you've got to tag the telescope, but if on Facebook, you can just send a message. It listens for hashtagged keywords in the messages from observers. And so this is a not complete, but this is a list of the different types of commands that the telescope is listening for. You can send it the message hashtag hello, and it will reply telling you who it is. You can ask what the weather is or what the forecast is, which is useful if you're planning an observation and want to know what the weather in Halifax is going to be. You can, of course, request an image. And there's lots of other things that we can do as well. So the main thing that an individual would want to do with our telescope is to request something. And there's lots of options if you want to request an image. The first, of course, is which object. That's going to be the most important. You need to tell the telescope which object to point at. But you can specify certain things like the exposure length in seconds. The filter, we have a number of filters available. You can say, I want there to be a minimum altitude in my observation. So don't take an image of it if it's below, say, 45 degrees in altitude. You can also specify a particular epoch if you need an image taken at a certain time, and a variety of other things as well. And I'll note here, that's okay. All of the commands and much more description of all of the different commands are available on our website. We'll go to the next one. I think that there was, did I miss it? I think there was one other, go back one, sorry. I also want to mention, so not only can you request an image to have it send you a black and white image back, but you can also process those images using this robotic interface via social media. So there is a process command as well that allows you to edit those images or combine multiple images into a color image, which makes, I think, astrophotography more accessible to anybody that might want to do it, even if you don't have the equipment to do it yourself. So you could take an image, say, in the red filter, green filter, and blue filter, and then ask the telescope to process those to create a color image for you. So I just wanted to highlight that as well. I thought that I had another slide, but it must have not saved it. So something else that's important, especially here in Halifax with all of our rain and clouds and whatnot, is that we keep an eye on the weather. Because we have this big telescope with lots of cameras and equipment and such attached to the back of it. It wouldn't be good for it to get rained on. But also having a cloud sensor and wind sensor up on the roof allow the telescope to know if the skies have cleared. So maybe it was cloudy up until, say, 2 a.m. and then the skies are beautiful and clear. Then the telescope can start up on its own without anybody needing to be there and start taking its images and taking advantage of those clear skies. So there is a cloud sensor and a wind sensor that we've got up on the roof. There's a photo of it over on the right side of the slide there. And all day and all night, it is collecting data about the temperature of the sky or the speed of the wind. And so these lines are hard to see, but there are different threshold levels. So there's a clear cloudy threshold where if the skies are clear, the telescope will start up when the sun has set. But there's also a threshold where if the skies get to a certain amount of cloudiness, the telescope dome will close, the dome shutters will close, the telescope will turn off, protect itself, make sure it doesn't get rained on. So that red line would be that, back. So that red line would be the close the dome line to protect the telescope. There's also wind sensor to not have the telescope run if the wind is too strong. If it's too windy, especially up on the 24th floor, some 80, 90 meters above the ground, it gets pretty windy up there. And so if it gets too windy as well, the dome shutters will close, everything will turn off, and the telescope will protect itself that way. So we'll go to the next slide. And I think if you hit again, this is a small video too. Okay, cool. So I'll just kind of talk. This is really short. So we also have webcams up on the roof to help the technician see if the skies are actually clear or cloudy. But it also allows individuals to see what the telescope is doing. You can see over on the right side in the middle, our observation deck usually is not full of scaffolding and things. It's been taken over by construction for the time being. But that's where our observation deck would be. And then we also, this big thing in the middle, we have an all sky camera that points upwards to capture what is going on up in the sky. And over the last week or so, there have been some nights where only the first like hour or so of the night was recorded. So I coincidentally got a very short movie that fit in the PowerPoint. But usually these are movies that span over the whole night. And it's interesting to watch those back to see if there's anything interesting going on in the sky, or watching planes go over, or helicopters move around. It can be pretty interesting. Mike lets me know whenever there's anything weird happening with the all sky camera, which is excellent because I don't necessarily check it every single day. But if there's something weird happening, I get an email and it's very much appreciated. But yes, we have these cameras as well up there to help us see what's actually going on. And it can be kind of fun. So where the view of the all sky camera is right now, the observatory dome is up at the top. And if you watch it for a while, you can see it kind of spin around. And I think it's fun to watch because to me, the observatory has this big personality. Whenever I go up to the telescope, I usually talk to it. Not that it talks back, but if it's ever doing something weird, I'm like, what are you doing, bud? Like, can we fix this? So we'll go to the next slide. Maybe. So this was, what day is it today? The 3rd? So this was a couple of nights ago. This is just an example of what it does when the skies cloud over. So it was observing something for a while, but during the middle of an observation, it noticed that the skies became cloudy. So it was like, oh, I'm going to try that thing again tomorrow. Noted that the sky was cloudy. It waits to see 15 minutes of clear skies. And then when it does see those 15 minutes of continuous clear skies, it will start up its process again. And so I think if you just hit once, that tiny little video will play on the right side. I just thought it was cute. This was from one of the all sky cams. Just move it around. Yeah, let's go to the next one. And this is the big thing, right? So this all happens without a human needing to be there. So the telescope will start itself up automatically when the skies are clear and dark. It will turn on its cameras, set the camera coolers to the correct temperature, make sure the telescope is focused, that it's actually pointed at what it thinks it's pointed at. And then it will look at its requested cue, see what can be observed, play a bit of a points game with all of the requested observations, and then take all of its observations in sequence, whichever one has the most points at any given time. So the fact that this is all remote and automated means that I can troubleshoot issues from at home, which can be nice. Students can get many observations done during the term, say during those early morning hours when people would generally be sleeping. It allows for a lot more in-depth student projects where we can observe longer duration things or observe the same thing over a longer period of time. And then also observers around the world can benefit from any time that the telescope's not being used for in-person stuff or other student stuff. So it's really great to have all of this automation at the BGO. And then the next slide, I took an image that Dave made a while ago to kind of show the intricacies of all of the different things that are talking to each other. And this should be updated. I should update this. Is there? All right. Okay, I'll have to remind you. Dave says that he thinks that there's a newer diagram, but this at least illustrates that there are a lot of different things that are talking to each other to get our telescope to work, to connect to socials, to deal with the weather, to go through its queue and to take and process all of those images. So I'll go to the next slide. And goodness gracious, our social media robot has done quite a bit in the 7 years that it has been connected to social media. So all time statistics, and these are available on the observatory website too. The number of completed observations is almost 17,000, which is 2,300 hours of observing time on our telescope. The number of active observers, so the number of observers that have and had an observation done, have requested and completed an observation, is about 742. There's a total of more than 1,000 total observers, but some of them might request an account and then not actually request any images. They just get excited about hearing it and then maybe forget to request something later on. The number of nights with observations is about 937 over 7 years, which I guess tells you how many clear nights there are in Halifax, giving us an average number of observations per night at about 17, which it's pretty good considering there are some observations that might be 3 hours long if a student is doing an exoplanet transit, or there are some observations like observations of the moon that are just fractions of a second long. I think if we hit the next slide, it will bring up more things on this slide. Yeah. And then also on the observatory website, which I think is interesting, there are statistics by month. And so this is just for the year 2022, starting with January on the left side, going down to December on the right. The top one is the number of observations completed in each of the months. And so in some of our busier months, when students start to get projects in the fall, or when students are trying to finish projects in, say, March-ish, we can do more than 400 observations, or we did more than 400 observations in a month earlier this year. Yeah. Yeah, so Dave was saying, for those out in Zoom, Dave was saying that in 2022, we've broken the record for the most number of clear nights. And also, was it 35? What did you just say? Wow, yeah. Yeah, and so the second thing that Dave was mentioning there is during 2022, and these stats are on the website as well, we have done more than 3,500 observations just in 2022, which is, as Dave was saying, like double what would be typical in previous years. And like Dave just said here in the room, that's probably because of our new, much faster mount, allowing us to slew to different objects quite a bit faster, get those observations done really quite quickly. And I thought, so the bottom plot here, the number of nights with observations. So anytime the telescope started up and tried to take at least one observation, I found that there was, like Dave was mentioning, there was a lot of clear nights. And I saw that here in the plot too. Like in May, there was like 18 clear nights, which seems like a lot for Halifax. We'll go to the next slide. But we can really, and I'll talk about this, I just wanted to, thought came in my head about the last one, we can really take advantage of all of those nights that have any amount of time that are clear. And there's interesting projects that both our students can do and those around the world can do with this automated telescope. And so one of those is maybe we can study stellar evolution by observing star clusters. You can take an image, multiple images of a star cluster, and plot it on an HR diagram with the temperature and the brightness of the different stars and learn something about that cluster that way. So this is one of the projects that we have students doing, and then in the next, or students could do. And then something else that I thought was interesting, one of our observers in Italy usually sends requests to study variable stars. And this was interesting. So there was one image from the Abbey Ridge Observatory, Dave's observatory, and the Burke-Gaffney Observatory. that were used in a poster that was given to the Italian astronaut Samantha Cristoforetti. And so she was on the International Space Station. And what happened here is they wanted observers to observe the asteroid that was named after her, and it was made into this poster, and she was given this poster. And so the Burke-Gaffney Observatory and its robotic interface was used by somebody in Italy to participate in this program, which I think is kind of shows off really the interesting and the interesting things that people with access to the BGO can do that maybe we hadn't really thought of. So I'll go to the next slide. And of course, can't mention the BGO without mentioning that at the Burke-Gaffney Observatory was where the first supernova discovered from within Canada was discovered. And so that was in 1995, before everything was automated. But supernova discovery and follow-up are still things that could be done with the Burke-Gaffney Observatory and could be more easily done with its automated system at this point. And then I just wanted to show some pretty photos. So these were all images that were taken and then processed using the robotic interface at the Burke-Gaffney Observatory, just giving us a taste of the different things that can be done with it. So, you know, galaxies, globular clusters, the moon, my favorite thing, nebulae, comets, following up on the motion of comets there. And then so a little bit at the end, just wanted to give us a note of how any of us could use the Burke-Gaffney Observatory. How do you become an authorized observer? And I have authorized with that hashtag because that's the tag that the telescope recognizes. And so anybody can use the Burke-Gaffney Observatory system, but we just have a list of authorized observers, hopefully to cut down on the amount of spam that it would otherwise see and to kind of keep track of who is using the observatory. So we can choose any of the following. You can text the telescope, you can tweet or Twitter DM, you can use a Facebook message, or you can use an email to communicate with the telescope. And that's just a screenshot of what that looks like with the texting interface. And so if we go to the next slide, there's a little bit more information about that. So that's the same information from before, the text or tweet or Facebook or email. And you just have to send a message that says hashtag authorize with who you are and where you are and like who you are affiliated with or why you would like to use it is useful information for me. So you could say hashtag authorize. Hi, I'm Tiffany Fields. I just learned about the BGO at the Halifax RASC meeting. And we do just allow one account per person. But whichever account you have, you could then also use the communicator app that we've got. And so the first step would be to request that authorization using your name and who you are. In this example, I am already authorized on Facebook. So if I send that authorized request, it yells at me saying that I'm already authorized. But if I go to the next slide, once we send that message, we can start to request images from the observatory. So we can request things, and maybe the first thing that you think of is a bright star, because that's a pretty common astronomy thing to think about. You would just say hashtag request object equals the object name. So if I said hashtag request object equals Vega, the telescope's going to yell at me because it's a star that's too bright. And if we image a star that's too bright, maybe it would leave a ghost image on the CCD, affecting subsequent observations. Okay, well, if we go to the next slide, we can think about what can we actually observe with the telescope. So the general guidelines to think about is that the objects should be about the size of the full moon or less. They need to be visible from Halifax. That's important. The telescope needs to be able to see it. And it should be visible roughly in the next 4 weeks after you request, so that it doesn't sit in the queue forever. And we can't image objects that are too bright. But the good news is that the telescope will generally tell you if you can or cannot observe something, so you could test it out. And if I go to the next slide, we can see that the telescope indeed does try to keep itself safe. If I hashtag request object equals sun, it will say I cannot observe the sun without frying myself. So that's that like personality that Ralph has. So I'll go to the next slide here. I was thinking about doing a live demo and I don't want to try, but we can chat about that afterwards. But we'll go to the next slide. Because this is like my call to action here at the end. What can we all do to get involved? Join us for a public tour or a private group tour. The public tour tickets are hard to get. I realize that, but I also happen to know the person that runs the tours. Happens to be me. I also do private group tours. So Girl Guides, hubs, workplaces, sports teams, meetup groups, that sort of thing. But also, if you are willing, you can volunteer to help with the public tours. I find that the folks here have a particularly useful skill of being able to share the nighttime sky with people, and also usually have the skill of being able to use non-robotic telescopes, which we also have at the observatory. So you can help out, absolutely. Or if you just want to become an observer with the BGO robotic interface, you can request your own observations, see what interesting things you can do. And I think that should have the next slide there too. So this is kind of what I'm saying. Those tours have been hugely popular. I would love to offer more of them. And I'm kind of limited in time and in people resources. And if you would like to help out, definitely chat with me, because I think that pretty much anybody at these meetings would be a good help in sharing astronomy with others. So I think that's the end if I go to the next slide. I'm realizing as I'm sharing this that it wasn't exactly the last version that I saved, but that's fine. All of the information is still there. And I am happy to take any questions that we have at this point, either in person or on Zoom. And yeah, in the front here. We'll try the extra.
Construction related. On the observation platform this summer. What is it concerning?
Yeah, so the construction that is happening on the roof of the Loyola Residence Building, they are replacing the paneling that is along the corners of the building. It's just general building maintenance for the Loyola Residence Building. So they have placed the platforming or like the stuff to hold the baskets that go all the way down up on the top of the roof. And so they've been going around the building doing all the different corners, replacing the corner paneling. But also what is going to be happening kind of starting in January is St. Mary's building on the south side of the residence. They are installing panels to get some energy from the sun. So that'll be part of what's happening there. But our observation deck will be available to us again after they're done with all of the different corner paneling replacement. So it's nothing but the observatory, it's just in our space. Yeah. So that was a good question. So the question was, why was the inside of the dome, or was the inside of the dome ever painted? So we're asking, why is the inside of the dome this white color rather than like a black color to reduce reflection from light pollution from all of the lights that are around? Do you want to? You picked the color. All right, Dave.
Yeah, so the question was, the inside of the dome, top part, I think is painted white, except the area around the area within the first foot or so of around the slot is black, but the rest of it is white. And believe it or not, sorry, why is the dome white? The dome is white largely because of media reasons. We do so much, photography in there when the television cameras come, and they were always complaining that they had poor lighting. So by having a white dome, you can just get a lot of natural light to be able to see. So it's not ideal in that sense. But the area just Either side of the dome slot is painted black, so if the telescope gets close to the edge, you're not going to get a glare off the edge or a real bad white glare, but the actual dome is white purely to get the color inside the dome. Previously it was black, I think.
Tiffany, we have one question here from,
Yeah.
I think it's Lisa Ann. Let me just read it to you then. It says, firstly, firstly, thank you for your help. Really been great tool for learning, trying my hand at processing. Question: the social media platform be in flux, or is it a wait and see situation?
So any plans to expand away from Twitter, because Twitter is a bit of a mess right now? So part of my answer is most of the social media connection code is written by Dave. All of the social media connection code is written by Dave. And so me expanding it will require a little bit of help from the telescope wizard, Dave. Part of the reason that I am not too concerned about Twitter being crazy is that we do have the other social media interfaces like Facebook and email and text, and the observatory always posts all of its messages not only on Twitter but also on the observatory's website. There is a database that it pulls from where it populates all of its past messages, so they will still exist on the internet somewhere even if something happens to Twitter. There are other social media platforms that I think would be neat to expand to. And I would say that is a thing that I would like to do in the future, but without a timeline of when that might happen. You wanna take this? You better.
I have looked into other platforms, in particular, the most obvious one to me, although it's probably passe now, is Instagram. But when I looked into it, Instagram would not allow robotic posts. The policies would not allow non-humans to post pictures and text for some reason. And that may have changed. I haven't looked in the last year or two. There are others. I think what I'd prefer to do is figure out a way to make the observatory app a little less dependent on the underlying communication. So if you registered with the app, then you wouldn't necessarily have to have another communication medium. The other concern I've always had is, well, I think in recent years, the most popular one with the students has actually been text. Because it's such an old technology and everyone who has a phone has text and it's easy to do and they're already using it. So text is in some ways universal. But the email interface is a little less secure than I would like, because anyone can spoof an email. So I think I'd like to try to figure out a way to secure the email interface a little bit better before worrying too much about. I think Twitter's going to sort out one way or another, and I think we're just in a couple of months of flux. But time will tell, I guess.
I was nodding along to everything that Dave was saying. Well, you can probably see me, I guess.
Thanks so much for that, Tiffany. Much appreciated. Nice to get an update. And hopefully it won't be another 3 years before we see you again. I think so. Thanks again. Next up is okay. So so yes, you can hear me now, can you? Those in Zoom land? Because there's no number on this, just a dot. Anyways, Chris Young, who is our expert extraordinaire on all things historical about astronomical stories. Yeah. So in any case, I will hand the floor over to Chris, and he'll give us another edition of Skylog.
Thank you, Judy. I'm on. copy just over here for the camera. So, welcome everybody. Okay, you can go to the next slide. So this evening's presentation involves the Pleiades. It often shows up, and because it's easily found and identified, and its timing has served purposes for many cultures all over the world, for planting, navigation, for telling the weather and change of seasons. Next slide, please. So this presentation is based on a paper I found on JSTOR. JSTOR is a very useful source of academic papers. You can register for free, and you can read or download 100 papers a month, which is adequate for my needs. You've seen this map before, pre-Columbian map of tribes of North America. So we're going to be dealing with the area of the right where the red dot is, over on the right-hand side, about halfway up, which is currently is in sort of present-day Rhode Island. Next slide. And I believe the author of the paper, Lynn Cece, became interested in that when she found a quote from a French explorer named Giovanni Verrazzano, who in 1524 came across and sailed up the east coast of North America, and he was in search of the Orient, as many were at that time. So his path is the arrows that you see on the screen. There are some other, if you will, points that look like they're occupied in sort of in kind of blue or purple, but those are sort of British settlements that came 80 to 100 years later. So he came up the coast, and his crew were pretty worn out. They had scurvy. They're tired. They'd been beaten up by storms, and they took refuge in Narragansett Bay, which is in Rhode Island. Next slide. And this is a map that was made based on his trip. And it's, you know, I'd hate to have to navigate with that. I went looking thinking that maybe this was just an illustration for a book. It was in a book, but many maps of the time didn't provide any more detail than this. Where the red dot is, bottom center, is where he took refuge. That sort of little inlet that has a series of small islands. Next slide, please. So here's a more modern, it's 250 years later. I think it's probably a British map. And so we're going to be talking about Providence, Rhode Island, which is that red dot top left corner. So he came into this bay, and which probably would have been a little bit tricky because it's pretty narrow at where it joins the ocean. And looking at, I ran across a couple of maps that show how the tide runs and kind of the speed, and the water gets pretty fast through the restricted areas. So yeah, you can go to the next one. Thank you, Dave. But given the sort of the time and date of his when he visited in 1524, which was the end of April, beginning of May, and he has a quote. There he noted the Algonquin people relied in part on vegetables they grew. He wrote, in seeding, they observed the influence of the moon, the rising of the Pleiades, and many methods from their ancient lore, and also on game and fish. And this was translated, I presume, from the French of the 16th century. So the Algonquins were interested in they grow corn, maize. And maize was originally hybridized from a wild grass, teosinte, in Mexico 6,000 years ago. It then, over time, probably selective breeding and things, they improved on the corn until we get maize dolco, which are over on the right-hand side, which is very similar to our corn today. And actually, that corn is still grown in parts of Mexico. So that's where the corn was around 800, around the year 800, I guess. And it traveled, that kind of corn traveled all the way up through North America from Mexico and the Southwest. And by the year 1400, it was up into Ontario and as far as the Gaspé Peninsula. So there was pretty active trade going on there. Next slide, please. Thank you. So in order to follow the path of the paper, I became interested in this case in the science more so than some of the cultural aspects, but I wanted to see how this worked, retrace the steps of the author of the paper. So I looked at for the last frost date in spring, and which is circled there, May 1st to May 15th. Next slide. And then also the first frost date, which is October the 1st to October the 15th. So this is the U.S. Department of Agriculture and input from many others who have produced these maps, and then they're repeated online through a number of websites. So that gave me bracketed the area. The time period that's indicated for frost-free in the paper ran from the first half of May, and then they have it from October the 15th into the sort of the 1st of November. So a little later, their data was relied on information from the 1950s. So I don't know whether it was just whether we know a little more. Climate warming was already nudging us up. I'm not sure. Next slide. So knowing what the approximate dates are for when the frost ends and the frost begins. So I wanted to kind of look at, well, how does this relate to the Pleiades? So I looked around to see if I could find anything about the heliacal risings and settings of the Pleiades for Providence, Rhode Island. And anyway, it's more complicated than I was capable of doing in the last month or so getting this ready. So what I did is I played with Sky Safari, and what you see sort of midway up is kind of I guess a gold line that goes across. That's the horizon. And then I have a translucent, if you will, Earth below it, so that you can see where the sun position is below the horizon. The red dot on the right-hand side is the Pleiades, and the sun's approximately maybe an hour below the horizon, and the Pleiades is maybe half an hour above, sort of close enough. And so in playing with this back and forth in Sky Safari, I arrived at April the 28th. So this is the helical setting. So the Pleiades is setting with the sun. It's catching up to the sun, and the Pleiades will not be available to see until the following summer. So we're now in April. The next slide. Now, they also took their input. This would be the First Nations people. They got their clues from all around them. They're very observant, and paper mentions about the Mohegan looking at sort of squirrels, and then comparing the size of the leaf buds on a dogwood with the size of their ears. So if the leaf was the size of the squirrel's ear, well, then that meant kind of the frost time was over and they could plant. The Iroquois looked at oak leaves, and so when we have leaf buds on an oak tree, and they said it was when that was the size of a squirrel's foot or paw. So they're pretty observant to pick those things out. Squirrels were obviously pretty common for them as a reference point, but I think that was pretty good. Next slide. So we talked about the spring, and now in the fall, this is a picture of the Pleiades taken at Halloween. Next slide. So again, playing with Sky Safari. Here we have a chronicle rising of the Pleiades. So a chronicle is when the sun is setting and something else is rising. So the Pleiades is rising here on the east, in the east horizon, and the sun has set it's an hour or so below the horizon. And this time is October the 12th. So I tried to push this to kind of get the limits that I could. Next slide, please, Dave. This is just this is the area we're looking at. So Providence, we've got Cape Cod over on the upper right, and I looked at frost for Providence. I also looked for Woodford, which is further up in the upper left, and also Concord, which is just off the screen to the left, and they all had similar time periods. So I've got my dates that I want to work with, sort of my earliest and latest dates. Next slide. So I looked at the information on probabilities of frost. So the last frost, which will occur in the spring, I had determined the 8th of April was probably the date. So on the 28th of April, you have a 60% chance of having a frost, having a 36 degrees going down to 36, or you've got a 10% chance of getting down to 32. And 32 and below, as you know, kill your plants. So you weren't going to be planting before this. So the date's standing up. Next one, please, Dave. The fall, we have actually very similar chances, statistics. And so we talked about October the 12th. So I've underlined the 13th, which is the 60% for the arriving at the first time it goes down to 36, and for first 32 degrees, I have October the 12th, which is only a 20% chance of that. So anyway, the frost, you're good up to now, but only the frost is going to be coming very, very quickly. Next slide. So to summarize for Rhode Island, so the first frost was the 285th day, and the last frost in the spring is 118th, so that's 167 days. And that's likely pushing it, you know, as I was nudging Sky Safari, try and tighten it up. I will note that, because I'm concerned there's a lot of rocket scientists in the room, their map, and they look and say 1524, 365 days. What about the leap year? Well, leap years didn't start until 1582. So just trying to stay sharp. I mean, Dave Chapman's not in the room, but he'd be on me. Anyway, so 167 days. So the corn, the maize doko, takes about 120 days to maturity. You can't plant immediately after the first frost because the ground's too cold. So you wait for it to get up to around 50 Fahrenheit. So we'd add about 10 days for that. And in the fall, corn is right. You don't harvest it. Those kernels are too soft. You want them to dry up. They need to be dry for them because they're going to grind them up later. So perhaps 2 weeks to stay on the stalk to dry. Sometimes they could harvest them. They could lay them out on mats and things to dry them, but it would be easier to leave them on the stalk if you would. So between 100 minus 144 is 23 days, 3 weeks. So that's the tolerance for temperature and weather. The paper had come up with 153 days as being the frost-free period. Next slide, please. So I think they're close enough. So the visibility of the Pleiades on the horizons, they are reliable markers of the limits of frost-free growing season, and that requirements of that corn that they were using. That corn they found in archaeological sites had found remains of that corn, so they knew that was being used. It's important for the Algonquin to maximize their growing period because they get the best nutrition value from the year. And seed for 2 years, because if you had a bad year the next year, you didn't want to get wiped out, right? Because this is all survival. So I tried to max out the first and last visibilities of the Pleiades, but cloud cover and topography could shorten the visible growing season if you're talking about looking at the Pleiades, and that's your calendar. So your calendar may cover. So I felt that the what they had come up with in the research paper 153 days based on the visibility of the Pleiades seemed kind of reasonable to me. So I'm in the end, so conclusion is the Algonquin were pretty observant in relating their agricultural practices to the Pleiades visibility. So the author did talk about some of the cultural things about the Algonquin and other tribes. Paper was written in 1978. They weren't minded as we are now about sort of two-eyed seeing and things. The author talked about the practices of different Indian groups, First Nations groups, in terms of relating to the further the case. So, but I was intrigued with this this time. I'm sure perhaps maybe a little bit more entertaining. I follow the science, as I said, calculating the first visibility, and how close you can get to the horizon is somewhat complicated for a variety of factors. And page 68 of the handbook, there's also one of the things that comes into account when you go straight up. There's about 100 kilometers, if you will, till where space starts. That's called the Kármán line. Well, if you look horizontally out to, if you will, to the horizon, it's 11 kilometers. So there's a lot. So talk about it being at the along the horizon. So anyway, so when you're searching on the web, you fall down many rabbit holes and intriguing things. So anyway, thank you for listening to me today. I don't know if there's any questions at all. Nope. Everybody's quiet online. Good. Judy, hand it over. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Chris, for that. I have a question for you. Given the from Pleiades to Pleiades, spring and fall, do you know if First Nations still use that as a guide? Is there any indication in the article about that? Okay. Oh, sorry.
Well, the answer's no, Judy. But to expand on that a little, I sort of didn't research that. I know that there are some of the agricultural practices of some groups, because I was interested. I was looking at the Navajo. Navajo have a saying that you never plant when you can see. The Pleiades should never see you plant, right? So that's which was one of the cues, if you will, for the Algonquin on the East Coast as compared to them in the Southwest. And there are groups of the Navajo, and in the Southwest, there's a number of groups there that stick to the old practices, including the way they plant corn. It's very, very intriguing. I got down that one about the Three Sisters planting, where they plant the corn kernels in a mound first, and then after they come up out of the ground, then they plant the beans around the corn, so the beans can climb up the corn stalks, and then they'll plant winter squash on the outside of that, so the leaves will cover up the soil to prevent water loss, and this sort of the soil drying out. So anyway, and those are actually practices that gardeners use today. Anyway, thank you.
Thanks, Chris. I'm not going to put this on my head because next up is David Hoskin, our EPO and Outreach Chair, and Dave's going to do the What's Up for December. For December. And while he's doing that, just so you know, it is already posted on our website. So if you would like to follow along at home with this, you can. And if you'd like to refer to it in the coming days of December, it's there for your reference. So Dave, take it away.
Okay, good. Can you hear me? Okay, so the first slide is just to remind us that Mars has been putting on a really good show, and there's an event coming up that fingers crossed that the skies will be clear so we can enjoy it. It's almost a once in a lifetime event. So next slide, please. Dave. Okay, the sun this month. Days are getting shorter. December will have the shortest day. Winter solstice is on the 21st of December. And so sunset quite early. Start of the month it was 4:35 in the afternoon. End of the month it'll be a little bit later because we passed the solstice. Good news for imagers, dark skies early, so you can image your targets and still go to sleep at a decent time. Next slide. Okay, what does the sun look like today? I took this off Space Weather this morning, and this sunspot group AR 3153 is just rotated into view, and it's a big sunspot. It's fairly active. It's had some C-class solar flares, and chances are that it's going to and maybe there's some M-class solar flares coming. So if you're into watching the sun with a white light filter, that's one to look at. It's pretty easy to see, either with a solar filter or by a projection method. So keep an eye on that. I don't know if that was the sunspot that it was in the news last week. There was a pretty massive eruption on the far side of the sun. I don't know if this was the sunspot that was responsible for it, but it was the biggest flare in 5 years. So that could be pretty neat if we get a replay of that. Next one, please, Dave. The moon this month. So we're coming up on the full moon, the winter chief moon. And that's on December 8th. And also on December 8th, that is when the moon will occult Mars. But that'll depend on your location. In Halifax, we'll just see it graze or kiss Mars, kiss the moon. Mars will not actually disappear behind the moon. Anyone that follows the discussion group, Roy Bishop had a post, and he said out in where he lives in Avonport, he'll get about a minute where Mars is actually behind the moon. So the farther west you go, the more likely that you're going to see the moon actually occult Mars. And of course, at this time, Mars will be at opposition. Geminids will be peaking on the 13th to 14th. More of that later. Last quarter on December 16th, and then Ursids, then the new moon on December 23rd, and this is the Tom Cod spawning moon. Towards the end of the month, we have some nice night views where the moon is close to Saturn and Jupiter, and the end of the month, we'll see the first quarter moon. Next one, please. So this is what we can expect to see on December 8th. You'll have to stay up a little bit late. On about 12:14, this is when Mars will just be kind of kissing the moon, and then it'll slide along the moon. From Halifax, we'll see that for about the next 20 minutes. So if the skies are clear, should be a remarkable sight and excellent imaging opportunity. Fingers crossed. Excellent, great. So anyone doing Explore the Universe, again, the best nights are December 6th to the 10th. That's when the shadows along the Terminator will reveal the major prominent craters and mare for you to check off on your list. Next slide. Geminids. this is what you could expect to see. I think this is from Sky Safari. On the 14th at about 9 o'clock, Gemini will have risen, and the moon won't be up yet. So that's a good time. You'll start to see some Geminids around December 9th at its peak, about 25 meteors per hour be expected. Long slow tracks, and as I said, the waning gibbous moon won't rise till 10:38. So between 9 and just before 10:30 will be excellent time to look for this particular meteor shower. Next slide. Planets this month. Through November, we didn't see Mercury or Venus. Both those planets are going to make an appearance, and Mercury will have a conjunction with Venus on December 28th to 29th. The maximum eastern elongation of Mercury is on December 21st, the winter solstice. So that's a good opportunity if you want to see Mercury or image Mercury. It'll be at its maximum separation from the sun. Venus is low in the southwest after sunset by mid-December. Mars, of course, you go out at night and you look up, you'll see red Mars glaring at you. It's pretty obvious. It's above the horizon all night long through December. The disk is 17.2 minutes, right? Seconds, and magnitude minus 1.8, so very bright. Jupiter is also prominent in the evening sky. A lot of people have been dialing in their, if they're imaging, dialing in their scopes on Jupiter, and then waiting for Mars to get high enough to image. On December 1st, Jupiter is close to the moon, and then at the end of the month, it will be close to the moon. Saturn, only visible in the evening sky. Saturn sets fairly early now. Uranus is visible in the evening sky for all of December, and on the 5th, Uranus will be close to the waxing gibbous moon. So good opportunity to you have binoculars to identify Uranus. And Neptune, visible in the night sky, evening sky for all of December. So we can see all the planets in this month. Next slide, please. This is a nice Christmas present, Christmas Eve. The new moon, thin crescent, Mercury, and Venus will all be visible, forming a nice triangle around 5:10 p.m. So worth having a look at, and if you have a DSLR, take a picture. Nice. Next slide, please. Winter constellations. We don't have to wait now till after midnight to see the winter constellations. They're up in the late evening. Auriga, Gemini, Taurus, Orion, Canis Major, and Canis Minor. So those are your winter constellations for Explore the Universe. Next slide, please. This is a picture Dave Chapman took of the kind of the major winter stars, and they form two asterisms. One is the winter triangle, so Procyon, Sirius, and Betelgeuse forming a triangle. And then you have the winter hexagon, which extends that triangle to Gemini, Pollux and Castor, Capella, Aldebaran in the Hyades, Rigel, and then to Sirius. So six-sided with the Pleiades off to one side. Pretty nice to see in a clear, bright winter sky. Next slide, please. Winter stars. Brightest star is Sirius. and followed then by Capella and Rigel, Procyon, all pretty similar in brightness, and then the two stars of Gemini, Castor and Pollux. Castor is quite a bit dimmer than Pollux, but these are stars that are worth learning their locations, because if you're using a go-to telescope and you're aligning it, whether it's a Skywatcher with a SynScan or a Celestron, these stars are the ones are typically used to do your 1, 2, or 3-star alignments. Next slide, please. Winter deep sky objects, a lot of them. The one that I picked out for today's presentation is Kemble's Cascade. A nice binocular object. It was first noted by a Canadian amateur astronomer and looking for, not friar. It was a monk, a Canadian monk, Campbell. And it's this line of blue and orange stars that extends down to a nice open cluster, NGC 1502. And other deep sky objects for the winter are M35, M37, Pleiades, the Hyades, the Orion Nebula, and M47. So mostly open clusters, and of course the showpiece of Orion, the Nebula M42. Next slide, please. Winter double stars. This is a pretty easy one. Theta Tauri consists of 2 third magnitude stars. One is yellow, that's Theta 1, and the other is blue, that's Theta 2. Just off to the side of Aldebaran, so pretty easy to find. Although it's not shown in this particular picture that I took off Wikipedia, each of those stars themselves is a double. They're fairly close to Earth. In the case of Theta 1, it's 152 light years away, and Theta 2 is 157 light years. So these stars, this is not an optical double, they're actually linked gravitationally. Next slide, please. You get another shot at Algol, the demon star. On December 15th, it'll be at its dimmest, so it'll be occluded by by its partner on the 727, and then it'll brighten to its maximum at 10:57 that night. So if it's clear, worth having a look at this. Next slide, please. And I believe that's it. Any questions? What? Sure. Yeah. It's one of my favorite lunar objects to get a picture of. Any questions? Yeah. No questions? Great. Thank you.
So thank you for that. And again, the reminder that this presentation that you just saw is already on our website, so you can review it again. So if you could go to the next one, please. This is officially my last update from the board as its president. So you can reach me at least until the end of the day at that email address. But I'm sure most of you know what my email address is anyway. But John Nangreaves, congratulations, you're the new president. That is now your email address. Next one, please. I know you've seen these through Dave's presentation earlier, but I also wanted to note that Jason Dane's lunar eclipse photos were in the Chronicle Herald as the photo of the day, and Lisa Ann had her series of photos in Earth Sky. So congratulations to those two. Next, please. And Dave Hoskin had his photo of Mars as a picture of the day in Earth Sky as well, back in on November 23rd. Right. Want to remind you that December 10th, next Saturday, is the last date that you can submit articles to the next edition of Nova Notes. Lisa Ann will be expecting them, so if you have book reviews, photographs you'd like to enter, or some sort of article on some aspect of astronomy, please contact her and her and John at novanoteseditor@halifax.rasc.ca. All our editions are online, so you can read any one of them from way back when. I think our particular website only has them back to a certain date, and I can't remember how far back. But if you're really interested, you can find them way back when on the National RASC website as well. So if you can't find older editions on ours, they will be on the national one. Also, a feature that this past month, if you note the puzzle corner, there was a crossword puzzle in the last edition of Nova Notes, and the answers will be in the upcoming one, and we'll have 4 more for you in the future. So stay posted on that one. Governance, very quickly. We recognized that one of the aspects in our terms of reference was the use of social media. It hadn't been referenced because we never had the need for it prior to COVID. So in recognizing that, one of our policies regarding the ordinary committees, specifically Nova East, we changed, thanks to the recommendations that came out of the Nova East wrap-up meeting. We made recommendations for changing the dates of appointments to the chair and for members, as well as the use of social media to conduct meetings. Whoops, Dave, please. And with respect to the social media, our bylaw number 1 will certainly have to be updated to reflect the use of it as well in all the various types of meetings that we hold, be it the regular meetings, board meetings, and those special meetings directly. So we will be holding a special meeting sometime early in the new year to address that. So stay tuned for that excitement. Okay. The photo contest. Next, please. These are some amazing photographs that were submitted. Unfortunately, there were only 11 photographs submitted. Okay. One more, please. So consequently, our submissions from this year's contest will be carried over to next year, and we will be holding the contest next year. And we'll begin advertising this in January at members' meetings rather than waiting until summer months, excuse me, to advertise it, just to keep members apprised that they can submit these all year round. Sorry. The meeting dates, they are posted here. They're also posted on our website. The board on Tuesday night approved all the meeting dates for next year. And they will be hybrid just as they are now. So hopefully if you can attend either way, depending upon what your preference is. Go ahead. Explore the universe. You saw it displayed in Dave's presentation. He was explaining about the challenges for it. I do have copies with me today if anyone would like them. They're $20 a piece. Those of you watching this in the future and those of you watching Zoom right now, if you want a copy, contact me. I have them, and we can make arrangements to get one mailed to you. Dave, next, please. And the calendars are there. I have those with me today too. They're $25 a piece. And again, those of you out there, if you want a copy, contact me, and we'll talk about making arrangements for mailing it to you. And the 2023 calendar has some really cool things in it in terms of the numbers of photographs that are from Nova Scotia or Halifax Centre members. The cover has Tim Doucette's Iris Nebula. Go ahead. In the spring, we have, first one is Fiona Morris. Now, those of you that know Fiona know that she's only 17 years old, 18 years old. So she's one of our youth members, but does phenomenal work with the photography. And so she has the April photo. Okay. And Jason Dane has the June one with the blue horse, the blue horse head, sorry. So that's our spring ones. But if you continue, if you go on into the fall, we have Kathy Walker's Messier 5.
Next. Team Doucette, the one from the cover, and one more for December, Jason Danes Mellot 15. So we can enjoy the fall with all of our Halifax Centre members. And I'm sure Kathy will pipe in and correct me if I'm incorrect, but I do believe that she has contacted the calendar editor, and so she's going to be on the editing team for the upcoming 2024 calendar. So we'll see some changes perhaps to some of the things within the calendar. Okay. And so get your copy. So, and that's my really brief and last message to you all. Happy holidays. I'm hoping, like the picture shows here, to put my feet up for a bit and take some some rest for a bit. Enjoy your holidays, and I really want to thank everyone, not just the board, but every member in the center for making my past 3 years here really enjoyable. It's been a lot of fun. I've learned a lot from y'all, and I really truly do appreciate it. And I really want to give special thanks to Dave Lane, Jerry Black, and Bob Russell for yeah, for their work here in making this thing possible in terms of a hybrid meeting. So I really do truly appreciate that. And we'll be going forward into the new year with the same team to support us in our endeavors. So thanks one and all. And that's the end of our meeting. Enjoy the rest of your day.